We see a man hanging on a few spears, saying that it was a beautiful dream, and he himself was destroying it, devouring it and destroying it, but unfortunately, the man didn't finish his sentence because he died before he could finish it. Another man looks at his corpse and says, "At last he's dead, a miserable ending, befitting the most insidious of villains." Then he turns his back and walks away from the body. This is the final scene in the novel, the end of the villain. We see a man named Nam Hyun, who wrote the novel, sighing. He says that the death of the world's most powerful villain means that his series is coming to an end, and the next chapter will be the conclusion. He says that writing a novel he didn't want to write was a really miserable experience. Hyun starts to stretch, saying that at least he'll be able to finish everything first, and that he should leave any regrets behind. Suddenly, someone starts banging on his door, and he's surprised and asks who it could be at this hour. He says it's too late for any delivery, and goes to the door to ask who's there. But as he gets closer, he suddenly stops. He says it could have been someone drunk, and decides to go back to sleep. As he goes back, he spots a piece of paper flying through the air. He asks where the paper came from, and when he starts reading it, it says, "This is a gift, ask for what you want when you are in need." Hyun wonders what it means, and suddenly, a dark, red, and sinister aura begins to seep out of it. He sees the corpse of the villain he was writing about standing right in front of him. He chokes up, and the villain says, "This is my way of dying. I spent a lot of time and effort, 10 years honing my sword to avenge those who killed my family, lost my girlfriend and friends, gave up a lot of things, and still failed. And you, Hyun, know this better than anyone." Hyun asks him what he means by failed, and he starts to get confused. The man extends his hand towards him. Hyun screams and the aura starts to swallow him. The man says, "Please, do it instead, and I'll watch you do it." Things around him start to distort. We see the body of a man sleeping on a bed, slowly opening his eyes. Hyun suddenly gets up and wonders if he's fainted or not, but he sees a strange place in front of him. He asks, "What's going on here?" Then he looks down at his trousers and says, "What's with the pants?" He turns to the mirror and asks himself in amazement, "What's going on?" When he looks at his face, he says, "The ominous crimson hair, the devious mouth, and the narrow eyes that hide every trace of emotion." And he realizes exactly what happened. He enters someone else's body, and not just any body, the body of Arsene, Adele, the most powerful villain in the novel. What's worse, he's only a few days away from being assassinated. Next, we learn that Arsene is a half-demon. The Arsene family is a mixed bloodline descended from demons, and thanks to the power in their blood, they were once one of the greatest families in the empire, but they fell because of 6 specialized families. Currently, Arsene's bloodline is only as good as him. This is his background, his story, and the reason why he is evil. He tried to take revenge but failed, which is why he came here. In the next day, he will be killed by the knights of the 6 families. Hyun opens his status screen and says that in terms of talent, Arsene Adele was one of the most talented characters in his novel, but his talent doesn't compare to that of the main protagonists. No matter how charismatic the villain is, his intention was never to let him defeat the hero. On top of that, he is currently unable to control his mana and can't believe that the story he wrote to make the villain scary is now spinning around his neck. He spots the paper flying above his bed and stands up, stunned. He recognizes it and says it's the one that got him into the story in the first place. He had completely forgotten about it. Even if it doesn't do much good, he says, he's in a situation where he can't be conditioned. He thinks he was told to ask when he needs something. When he starts reading the scroll, he feels confused and asks himself why it is empty and where is the text that was on it, because there is nothing he can do in this body. Suddenly, a word appears on the scroll and addresses him as the author. She says, if he doesn't know how to use the gift, he answers, yes or no. Hyun gets nervous and says, what does he mean by author? And then realizes that this is the real Adele. Adele asks him to simply write yes or no on the paper. Hyun writes yes, while ignoring Adele's attempt to understand the situation. The scroll then begins to create a new text, explaining how to use the information and purchase, assuring him that she will answer anything he writes on the paper, and that some questions don't require a wish and others do. Adele says that the more important the question is, the higher the wish island. Hyun asks how he can go back to his real world, and Adele replies, that's impossible. Hyun replies that he wasn't counting on it in the first place, but he needs to know how to use mana and the characteristics of his body, because he has to deal with urgent matters first. Adele replies that the question doesn't need to be asked, and that controlling mana and using body properties has already been discussed, and asks if that's okay with him. Hyun says yes, and starts smiling, as he says he can feel the mana. The first characteristic is called dark cover, which is the ability to take away the 5 senses from a person. We see him making a small vortex on his hand, and he says that normally it would be much larger than that, but even in this form, it's very useful. The next power is the ability to bind opponents with his aura, called killing intent. It works, but only trained knights or soldiers can resist it, but it will affect ordinary people. Now all he needs to do is understand Adele's main talent, which is called switching places. This is simply the ability to switch places with any object he chooses, and is considered the best assassination skill of all. He starts using the first part of the skill called identification, and says that he can only identify an area of about 20 square yards, which is weak compared to his power in the novel, but with continued training, it will become a very powerful skill. He decides to try it on the armor in his room, and he starts to move towards it and create a link between them. Then he uses the second part of the skill called transition, and he and the suit of armor switch places in an instant, causing him to stumble and fall into the wall. He says he's not going to get it right the first time, but he's willing to try it 100 times if necessary, because he's racing against time to survive, as the 6 family's knights are on their way to kill him. At this moment, the main gate of the family's palace opens, and the knights enter. The servants look worried, and one of them asks where Adele is, and he replies that he's in his room. We recognize the commander of the Lyon County Knights, whose name is Feltz. He asks how he's doing, and is told that Adele hasn't moved in days, and Feltz looks a little disappointed. Then he and his men burst into the room. We see Adele. Adele says, Feltz sure doesn't want to let a little kid live. Feltz replies, nonsense, and then orders his men to finish him off. One of them steps forward and says, yes, sir. But Adele uses the first ability of the switch places skill and switches places with the soldier's weapon to stab directly into the soldier's neck, shocking Feltz and his guards. Feltz orders his men to kill him immediately. Adele takes the opportunity to escape through the window. As he falls, he throws his dagger to the ground, then makes a connection with him and moves to avoid the damage of the fall. He says he has to get to the forest and starts running towards it. Feltz orders his men to chase him. Inside Arsen's forest, we see him exhausted, sobbing and saying, even if I'm lucky enough to escape the knights and make it back to the area, I'm not going to make it. He decides to open a portal in the forest to the demonic realm, which has recently been badly damaged by a war with humans. He says that if he shows them enough talent, they might accept him. But there was another issue. Before he could explain it, he heard the sound of horses and wondered why they were following him so fast. We hear Feltz ordering his men to spread out and circle around him. He then goes on to say that he doesn't know the exact location of the gate, but he's sure he's close to it. Then he steps on a tree branch that makes a sound, and immediately realizes that something is wrong. That's when a huge attack with a green aura rips through the forest. Feltz says he was hiding here. We see Adele downloading his teleportation ability and saying that he's only used it once or twice, so he needs to hurry up and find the portal. He then adds, maybe there's no other option. He then asks the real Arsene where exactly the portal to the demonic realm is located. The latter replies that the information has a price, and that he must pay either 100 gold coins or an artifact with a rank of sacred relic or higher. Adele replies that he doesn't have anything like that right now. Suddenly, an attack from behind him sends him flying through the air, and he rolls to the ground before crashing into a tree trunk. Feltz approaches him and asks, did you run away because you want to live? He then adds, you're going to die here, whether you want to or not. Adele responds, don't laugh at me, I'm not going to die here, because there is only one way left, and I decided to try it, whether it works or not. Feltz asks him, are you going to fight back? He says, you are still the master of the family after all. Adele responds sarcastically, asking him why he's acting so dignified when a bunch of adults are chasing one kid, and suggesting that he change careers to nanny because that's what he's best suited for. He then laughs and adds that it could be difficult for him, even on his own. Feltz is easily angered by the sarcasm and says that he was going to get rid of him painlessly, but now he's going to stab him in the heart with the sword that the Count Lion gave him. Adele, realizing that this is his chance, lifts herself up and strikes Feltz's sword, and a message pops up thanking him for paying the price, saying that the amount paid was a little too much, but that she will guide him to the gate immediately. Adele is happy that his adventure was successful, while Feltz is shocked and confused as his sword disappears from his hand. Adele looks to his side and sees a huge red light, so he uses his teleportation ability to get closer to it. Feltz sees him walking and yells for him to stop, but Adele doesn't want to do that and can't believe he followed him this far in the first place. He's standing in front of the gate to the demonic realm, but Feltz cuts down a tree and uses it as a weapon, saying he won't let him walk. Then he throws it towards him with great force, and when it comes close to the back of his head, Adele smiles and transports himself through the gate. Feltz stays where he is, angry that Adele was able to get away from him. Not only that, but Adele says goodbye to him and says, see you later, Mr. Feltz, and Feltz yells, damn. After a while, Adele wonders how long it's been since we've seen him eat a piece of dried meat. He says that after he passed through the gate, he found himself in a dungeon, a man-made dungeon called the Place of Secret Satanic Arts. He wonders what would put dried meat on a stone bed in the first place, and if there was anyone guarding a treasure in this place, not to mention that there is a barrier to prevent attacks, with a stone guard in front of it. Adele doesn't know what kind of big family built this place, but it's full of strange things, and the guard is terrifying to look at, and if he tried to confront him now, he would be completely destroyed. Suddenly, the paper starts to light up and says that this is the only time he won't be punished, but warns him that he can't offer things he doesn't have. Adele responds sarcastically that the man is crazy, but that means he'll do it again. Then he notices something about a part of the hedge that looks strange. He reaches out and puts his palm on it, and says that he can feel things like this only because he's next to Adele's body. A voice says that he doesn't have the right, that he thinks it's a mechanism that disables the barrier, and that it's a shame, he has to find another way to get out of here. He sees a piece of stone on the ground and says it was dropped by the guard, and if it's stone, it could work in his favor. He starts attaching himself to it, then moves and switches places with the stone. Now that he's moved through the barrier, he says, "That's it, it really worked." The guard's eyes are wide open. The scene changes to another place where we see a huge castle, and the sky looks amazing, almost like an eclipse of the Sunday. There is someone on the ground laughing, while someone else is watching them from above. This is Creed, the head of a large clan in the demonic world, specifically the Paris clan. Creed says that the place is really crowded, maybe because his daughter is preparing to invade the mid-level hidden domain soon, and it's a very complicated subject. If she succeeds, she gets the right to enter Sight, a school in the demonic realm. But even if he orders her to fail, she will disobey his orders, because she doesn't see any way to avenge the humans who killed her mother except by entering the Sight. He says she is very weak, and has no idea if she can survive in a place where only demon-like bastards gather. And then he sighs anxiously. A maid comes in and says there's something wrong. He asks her what she's making such a fuss about, and she apologizes and says she just wanted to let him know that there's someone in the hidden domain right now. He asks her if she's sure, and she says yes, and there's no sign that they opened the door to get in, which is what's confusing everyone. Creed asks if they know who this person is, and she replies that he touched the entrance mechanism from the air, and that's all they know so far, and no one knows who he island. Creed says he could have been forcibly summoned through the portal that was created during the human-demon war. He then tells the maid that he's sure to die, so there's no need to worry about him, and they should focus on his daughter's test preparations. She says, "Understood," and Creed looks out the window again and says that if things go well, he could get a good pawn, provided he dies in the invisible realm. We're back to Adele as he switches places with the stone and screams that he was going to die. This means that even if the barrier disappeared, he would still be in trouble if he got out. But he suddenly stands up and says, "Wait, the guard is also made of stone." He decides to give it a try. He starts doing his marking ability, attaches himself to the guard, smiles as he says, "I did it," and then switches places with him. The guard is surprised and starts attacking the barrier, trying to get out. Adele says he's going to die if he keeps doing this, and now he just needs to find the exit. But he suddenly stops again because there is another barrier, and this time on the other side there is a giant bug. He says it's important at every stage, and that it's more dangerous than the wolf. But as expected, the insect is also made of stone, and he could leave it on the other side as well. In this stage, the ground begins to collapse, and Adele begins to replace parts of the terrain. He says it's pretty easy as long as he has a place to move to in the trap area. He lands safely on the other side and is greeted by people at the end. Adele is surprised that they are welcoming an intruder and says, "This looks like the boss's quarters," and asks if anyone is there. He comes closer to see a skeleton in armor, and Adele recognizes him as the Death Knight. He says that based on his strength, he looks like Feltz. The Death Knight tells Adele that he respects him for getting to this point. In this moment, Adele connects himself to him and then switches places with him. The Death Knight is still trying to finish his sentence, while Adele is wondering where the treasure island. When Adele sees the treasure, he says it's bigger than he thought. There is also an ornament with a black dragon engraved on it. Adele says the ornament looks familiar and wonders if he has seen it before. Then he thinks that among the higher-ranking demonic families that represent the 7 deadly sins, the black dragon represents evil and pride, which is the 7th sin related to the Paris family. He says that if he were to catch him, he would be killed without a word. He opens the box and says that since things have come to this, he just wants to get rid of it and escape, and that there must be something useful in it. But as soon as he opens it, something jumps out of the box and sticks to his face, and he starts to choke. Then, it goes straight into his nostrils, and he starts to come back, shining and holding his head, screaming in pain. Then we see a lot of blood flying and hear Adele sobbing as we see his eyeball on the floor. He asks how long he has been unconscious and why his eyeball is on the ground. He draws his sword and looks at his reflection and finds that his eye has turned black and purple. He asks if the liquid that attacked him is the one he has in mind, and starts looking at its characteristics, and we see that he has acquired a new trait called Suburbia's Eye, which gives him a tremendous improvement in kinetic vision, and this effect kicks in after he kills an enemy. He says that with this ability, he will never lose to groups of enemies weaker than him, and that he may have made the right decision when he came to this place. He gets up and says that he has gotten everything he needs, so he has to go now. He says he was so busy with the box that he didn't realize there was another door behind it. He wonders what he's going to do. He's made a lot of noise and there must be a lot of soldiers waiting for him, and he'll be killed if he gets out. He wonders if he needs to kneel faster than the speed of light, to not get killed immediately. First of all, if they find out I'm an arson, they'll kill me even if I beg for mercy, so I have to hide my family badge. He says. The dead knight then screams and orders the door to be opened immediately, much to Adele's dismay, and adds that, Her Highness is coming quickly, so open the door. Adele wonders what this means, and then speculates that the dried meat on the bed could be because this is a field created by the higher-ups for training purposes. He says he needs to find out who owns the field, because he stole the reward they were supposed to take, and they'll cut him to pieces if they catch him. Therefore, he asks the scroll for the closest character to him. The scroll replies that the information has a price, and he must pay something worth 100 pieces of gold or an artifact with a rating of relic or higher. He wonders what else he can pay, and decides to sacrifice part of his magic power, paying 100 of his maximum magic power. He says it's going to be hard, but he can make up for it later if he lives. The scroll agrees to the deal and starts taking his energy, then tells him that the closest person to him is Renee, Creed's youngest daughter, and we see her coming towards him. Adele says his life is over. It's something the Paris family did to train the little girl, and the Eye of Suburbia was her supposed reward when it ended. Since Renee has enough power in the family, she will tear the guards apart like butter and show up in front of him. And that's exactly what she does. We see her kill the dead knight in one fell swoop, and then stare at Adele. He says he's going to do it. She points her sword at him and asks him to identify himself. He gets down on one knee and congratulates her on making it through the field, and says she's finally worthy. She launches a killing intent and orders him to explain immediately. He says the president ordered him to be her guardian, adding that their eyes met, but she didn't recognize the Eye of Pride. She asks if they really sold him out like that, and he tells her that, despite his appearance, he is very clever and intends to use Rini to get out of here. She started laughing, and he wondered if she didn't trust him. He switched places with her sword and approached her in an instant. This took her by surprise, and she appeared, holding his wrist. He said he thought he would be useful in protecting her. She immediately withdrew her hand and looked very angry, but she pulled herself together and laughed it off. He said it was good that she got over it. Adele then said she had to leave and go to the president immediately because he was expecting her. She said, okay, and he said he was going to finish the rest of his duties because he had to get out of there as soon as possible. When he opened the door, he said he would make sure he wasn't late. Renee froze, and her father, Creed, appeared in front of her. Creed started laughing and gave off a strong aura. Adele said it was bad and asked what brought Creed here, realizing he would kill him if he found out he had taken Supriya's eye. But he asked himself why Creed didn't react. Creed asked her if she had made it through the sphere, and she said, yes, sweating with anxiety. Creed said it was fine and asked her to walk behind him. Adele wondered what he was thinking and started to walk behind them as well. He told himself there was no way he could to escape their scrutiny, and he had nothing to offer the paper, which meant he couldn't use its power. Finally, they reached the palace. Creed stood up and told everyone to go home. He told Adele to stay here and that it would be returned to him afterward. Adele thought to himself that this might be his chance to walk away, but sensing that someone was watching him from the trees, he said, no problem, I'll stay here. In Creed's office, Renee appeared standing in front of him. He told her that she had completed his last mission and asked her if she really wanted to enter the training facility. Yes, she said, so he looked out the window and asked her what she thought of him. The question took her by surprise, and she wondered how Adele had gotten so close to her so quickly. He smiled and said he thought it was interesting. Then he told her that now that she had proven her worth, she could go to site as she wanted. She was very happy and thanked him. After I walked away, he said that he thought Adele would die the first time he entered the field. But he lived and even got the Eye of Supriya, which changed Renee's opinion of him, so he definitely deserved to use it. As for Adele, he was just wondering how long he was going to stay here. Then, at sunset, we saw Adele being led by a servant. The servant told Creed that he had found him. Creed was sitting behind his desk looking at him. Adele was asking himself what was going on in his head and asked him why he was still alive. Creed smiled, called him an asshole, and said he had cheated his daughter well. He then emitted a very strong purple aura that squeezed Adele so hard that he couldn't breathe. He fell to the ground, saying that he knew he wasn't going to kill him. Creed immediately withdrew his aura and said, that's interesting. Adele said his energy is really amazing. Creed told him he was very quick-witted and asked him his name, and Adele introduced himself. Creed then raised his hand and wrapped an aura around it that made Adele feel like he was flying through the air and very close to him. Adele asked him what he wanted from him. Creed said for him to open his bug, and a small snake appeared to fly towards him. Creed said he just wanted to finish what he was telling his daughter, and the snake started crawling down his throat. Creed then said that if he had any more thoughts, the venom would tear his heart out. He added that he would prepare a place for him to sit, and that he should wait until he was followed. He then ordered him to walk away, but Adele wondered what this was all about. He was taken to the house, and the butler told him that he would be staying here from today. Adele explains how he became dependent on this house because of Creed's wishes, but he is grateful that at least he is allowed to live there. However, he feels he is being taken advantage of. Creed partially admits it, so it could be a good situation. But more importantly, he needs to get rid of the need in his chest. He says he doesn't know if it's going to work or not, as he ties it up and replaces it with air. He says it worked as well as he expected, which means the need wasn't moving. He's relieved that it's not active, and adds that if it had failed, it would have been horrible really. Knowing that Creed would notice if he killed D, he asks himself what to do. The creature started to open its eyes. Adele said that since it had woken up because the mana that had been feeding it had been cut off, it had to eat it. He began to pull him with the tip of his finger, telling him that this was all he could eat, and that he had no choice but to be satisfied in this way. He started talking to him and telling him to go back to sleep, which he did and curled up in the little bed he had made for him. He sighed and said he was finally able to relax, asking himself how much longer he could take it, and feeling like he was about to collapse. He opened his status screen again and said he needed to check it. His spatial teleportation ability is now at the next level, but the issue is the amount of mana because compared to the heroes, it's just a drop in the ocean. He asks himself how to increase it and what he should do, then thinks there's a way. The next day, we see Renee telling him that she doesn't like it. Adele asked her what she meant, and she said it's been 3 days since he hired a bodyguard for her. Her reactions to him have always been cold. When she was young, her personality was playful, but it changed after she lost her mother at the hands of humans. And as a writer, Adele feels sorry for her. One of the servants called for them and said that Mr. Creed wanted to see them. The reason Mr. Creed wants to see them must have something to do with Renee joining Sect. Even though she passed the field test, Creed won't let her go. Creed tells her that Sect is not an easy place, and with her abilities, she will die there after a while, without being able to avenge her mother. Adele feels like he shouldn't be here, and Renee is starting to feel depressed. Creed then said that if Adele went with him as a bodyguard, he would let her enter the academy. Adele shook her head no. Adele wonders why she hates him so much. He explains that Sect is an academy in the demon world where all the elite kids from that world gather. It's basically a demon academy, and has always been at odds with the imperial school that the protagonist attended. In the course of the novel, many students die, including Rennie. It's the worst place where death seems inevitable for everyone. Adele said he didn't understand why a designer would go to a place like this if it were her, but he shrugged and said it could be the best place to gather strength. He knew most of the major incidents that would happen between the two schools, the imperial school and the Sect, and decided to give it a try. He told Creed he had a request. Creed looked at him, and Adele said that if he was going to be dragged there, he should get as much out of it as he could, and asked for something to do with mana. Creed laughed and said he thought he was going to ask him to remove his chest instead. Adele said he must not let him know that the poison in his body had already disappeared. Renee noticed his trembling and wanted to call him an arrogant asshole, but he said it wasn't too much to ask and he'd hear him out. He then asked Renee to walk, and she bowed and walked, but as she walked, she glared at him. Adele wondered why she hated the idea of going with him so much, and if Creed could give him an elixir or an artifact, he wouldn't be a monster. Creed said she was a treasure that family members could react to with sensitivity, so he ordered his daughter to leave. Adele was surprised that it was a family treasure. Creed told him that he knew the amount of mana he had was very low, and because he would die instead of his daughter, this was the least he could do for him. He then asks him to come closer, because Creed is going to pass on the Paris family's mana cultivation technique to Adele himself. Adele never expected this. Creed began to recite a hymn and said, "Demon King, grant your servant clarity of mind in the midst of chaos. Bless us with true relics, and do not let thousands of demons go hungry, but do not put them to the test." Adele sighed after the short sermon and transportation ceremony was over. Creed said that any normal person would have lost their mind after hearing the sermon, and that Adele is truly a special person. Thanks to this cultivation technique, his mana would be granted directly by the Demon Lord, and he would be able to get everything he wished for. Adele is surprised to learn that the source of his power is the Demon Lord. Creed told him that his family is related to the 7 deadly sins. Adele asked what they meant, and Creed said that after he planted the worm's poison in his body, it didn't matter if he was a spy or not. Adele said he didn't think he made the arson family part of the 7 deadly sins. Creed told him he could walk away now. Out in the woods, we saw Adele meditating on a rock. He said he was practicing here because his mana could get out of control. He began to feel the energy swirling around him, so he addressed the demon lord. He explains to himself that once he accepts the demonic energy, he won't be able to use human mana again, but he has no choice anyway. The demon lord looks down at him with red eyes and calls him a hybrid. Adele said, "That can't possibly mean what he thinks it means." The demon lord replied that he didn't think Adele had the blood of a child, but that he looked like a traitor. Adele asked him, "Are you the demon lord?" He replied, "Yes," and said that the world calls him the Lord of Pride. Adele asked him if he was going to kill him, and the ruler replied that if he was, Adele would have died the moment he spoke, but for some reason, he didn't want to kill him. Adele was surprised but relieved. The demon lord said he sensed that Adele was burdened with the same sin as he was, and felt a strange familiarity with him, adding that he would give him a mark of distinction because he was walking the same path. This sign indicates that he will carry his power, but he must be careful not to lose control because of pride. Adele said that since he borrowed the power of the demon lord, he got 3 extra lines thanks to the mark, and the mark is a tattoo, and if it continues like this, his whole body will be covered in tattoos. Sensing someone behind him, he spun around to see who it was, only to find Brainy watching him from behind a tree. He asked himself what had brought her here and if she had heard him, but she blushed and called him a dark priest. Adele thought to himself, "She's got it all wrong. We're moving into his house." Adele says it's been a month since he took the mark of the demon lord, and his money has skyrocketed. Even though he trained hard, I can't believe his energy has doubled in such a short period of time. It's probably because of his focus, and in a few years, his power will reach an insane level. In his current state, he could even conquer the invisible realm, but I wonder why Renee is practicing at home instead of going to the training ground. He called out to her, she looked at him and asked him what he wanted, then welcomed him with respect, which made him uncomfortable. He told her, "It's okay that you're not avoiding me anymore," but she took it the wrong way and thought he was a priest. Fortunately, she didn't overhear the conversation between him and the demon lord, but if she treated him as if he were her superior, there would be terrible rumors in the family. He called her again, and to her surprise, he told her that he understood what she was thinking, but he asked her to treat him like she used to before. She tried to explain that she couldn't, but he told her that he was just following Creed's orders to protect her, and that she should feel free to deal with him. She told him she would try, and immediately told him to go get some water. He asked her to repeat what she said, and she replied that she was repeating what he said, that he told her to take it easy on him when she was tired and thirsty after the training. He commented, as expected from the prideful family, her manner suddenly changed. She ordered him to hurry up, and he said, "There's no way I'm going to do what you want for hours." After a while, we see her drinking water. Adele says that he needs to hurry up and take control of the field, but Rinny won't let him, and he'll have time to act before the main character goes into the demon world before him, and he needs these treasures to be able to live in sight. He called her back and asked her about her preparations for enrolling in sight. She asked him why he was suddenly interested, and he told her that she would meet all kinds of evil people there, and he asked because he was worried about her. She replied that she had everything ready. He asked, "Are you sure?" He suggested she double-check because he didn't want her to get in trouble for forgetting something important. She wondered what he was trying to get at and asked him to get to the point. He told her that he was just worried about her because she was under his protection, but she accused him of lying and asked him what he was trying to do behind her back. That's when he realized his trick wasn't working on her. She began to wonder if he was fed up with her. He told himself that things were getting worse, so he told her that he had heard about a domain in the area and was planning to control it, all for her safety. She started to think about it, and he hoped she would believe him. Suddenly, she said she remembered what she had forgotten. He asked her to get back to him, and she said, "Heating." He asked her what she meant, and she drew her sword and said that she had not yet warmed up and that she was going to go with him to the field, and that they could finish one day if it was soon. Then, we learn that the domain is called the Domain of the Immortals, and says it used to be ruled by necromancers, but now it's full of ghost soldiers after the necromancers died in the war between humans and demons. Renee said she knew that. Adele said that's enough to worry Renee. It could be at least an upper mid-level domain. The number of soldiers has increased, so helping her wouldn't be a bad idea. It's just that moving them together would make it harder for him to escape the palace, and the news would reach Creed immediately. It's better not to leave if it's a burden on you, and if the president finds out, he said, but she interrupted him and said, "No problem, I know a secret exit." They went to a fence and we saw a hole underneath it, and she said, "Is it?" He commented that she looked like she knew the place well, so she was quiet for a while, but he knew she often escaped from here. He said it would be better to walk away before someone spotted us, and she agreed. When they got outside, they headed toward a mountain range. Adele asked her what Fatal had done. She looked confused. He realized he could be mistaken and said he had no reason to leave the place because he didn't know the area around them very well. She replied that they were almost there and were just counting down the next chain. He realized that this meant they were not far away, and she said, yes. They stood up suddenly, and then he said, it looks like we're here. He and she looked around and saw nothing but ruins. She said, damn the son of Spyros. He realized she was cursing, which is the meaning of the word in their world, and added that he had to hide from Renee that he is a descendant of Arsine at all costs, and that he is the only one who knows the way to the field. He said they could get in if they dug here, and she agreed. He thought he had written that the entrance was under the largest stone statue, and that the soldiers, whose bodies were rotting, were protecting the land. He saw a symbol on the ground and said, that must be the entrance. He asked, shall I go first? She said she would go first. When they came down, we saw torches on the walls, and the light was brighter than he expected. Look ahead, she said, and they saw a church, which meant they were in the right place. Adele said it was very different from the Paris area, and he bet there were at least 100 graves here. Renee told him it was time to go, and Adele pulled out a small dagger and said, okay. A skeleton started crawling out of the ground, but it wasn't alone. There were skeletons all around them. Adele said, I'll give it to you, and she said, okay. She took a deep breath and began to release her aura, darting between the soldiers and breaking them to pieces. He realized it was a good choice to go with her, and added that there must be a necromancer at the back of the crowd. She said, okay, and ran towards them, and he said he would catch up with her soon. The broken bones of the soldiers began to shake and remodel themselves in front of her. They're coming back to life, she exclaimed in surprise. We heard the necromancer say, she must be very brave to come in here, and then he ordered his soldiers to finish off the intruders. I realized they would still come back, and asked what they would do. Adele said it was because of the drug and told her to stop and keep going. I asked him what he meant, but all of a sudden there was an attack. But he cut off the skeleton's head and killed it, then said he had an easy way to get rid of it. She said, I see, and charged straight at the necromancer. The necromancer screamed and ordered his soldiers to stop them. Adele said they just needed to get to him and everything would be over. They just needed to destroy his energy ball, adding that he would finally be able to use the new ability he got from his newly developed switching skill. A giant skeleton soldier appeared in front of Rennie, and he realized that it wasn't going to be easy. He called at her, but she screamed and lunged and pierced it with one blow, destroying it completely. Adele was shocked by this, and used the locate skill to fix himself on the soldier's head, then switched positions to get closer to the necromancer, and while flying through the air, he said that the new ability allows him to switch places between objects. We watched as he pointed his sword and activated the ability, and the ball began to leave the necromancer's hand and landed in Adele's hand, who said, that's pretty cool. The summoner screamed in disbelief, but Adele crushed the ball with his energy. How did this happen? He asked in disbelief as the soldiers all began to fade away. Adele said, we did it, ma'am, and looked ecstatic. Adele said that all the tragedy happened because of what he wrote, and that he really hoped he could rest in peace now. Renee called him and asked him if there was anything else to do, and he told her, this is the time for the reward, and he finally got what he needed. One of them is a dagger called Dark Fang, which turns darkness into mana and provides with agility and speed in dark places. The other is a ring called Eternal Moon, an object that absorbs mana sensitivity and moonlight. Good, Adele said, adding that now he can use his darkness-related attribute to its fullest. He then said that the ring was nice, but he didn't need it, and offered to let her take it while he took the dagger. To which she said, okay. He said, in that case. Suddenly, he grabbed her hand and started putting the ring on her index finger. We saw her start to blush and tremble, because she was so nervous. He wondered why she was reacting like that, and wondered if rings had any other meaning to demons. He asked her what she thought, and at that moment we saw the ring around her finger and she said, this is amazing. He said he was pleased that she liked it, and then said, now that I've taken out the boss, I'll take all the gold. But she put her sword right next to him and gave him a sharp look. He laughed, and said he meant he would distribute it equally to the last millimeter. After they finished cleaning the field, they returned to the palace, where he spent his time doing Rennie's chores or training mana. A month had passed, and we saw that he had gained more mana in that time. He said that his progress was very satisfactory, as 350 mana points is considered to be in the top half of the rankings in the demon world. A day later, Creed summoned Adele and Renee to his office. He said it was time for them to enter Sect. Creed went on to say that they would be heading to the capital today to enter the academy, and asked if they had finished their preparations, to which they both replied, yes. He told them to leave now, as he didn't see the need for a farewell party. Renee hesitated for a moment and then bowed to her father, and Adele also bowed and said he would walk with her. Creed called out to him and said he hoped for a good result. Adele said, yes, and then stood watching as they got into the car. The driver said they were going to leave right away, and Creed was still watching from above. Adele looked up and said, he said he didn't want to say goodbye, but I guess even demons feel the need to say goodbye to their children. Despite his worries about the future, decided that things had come to this point, and he was going to fulfill his goals at sight. As the horses set off, the road was a bit bumpy. Adele noticed that Rainey hadn't said a word since they started walking, and wondered if he had done something wrong. She shook her head and thought to herself, I didn't like him at first because he was a little creepy, but he's prettier than I expected. Adele laughed nervously and said, it's nice today, isn't it? She told herself that even though his speech and behavior are not stoic, he is not as strong as he should be. She wondered to herself if he was really a priest or not. As for Adele, all he wanted to know was why she was calling him that. She sighed and told herself that this was a ridiculous idea. She had seen him speak to the demon lord herself, so she shouldn't doubt him. Adele thought to herself that he must have done something wrong. Then she looked at the ring on her finger and her cheeks began to blush as she looked out the window. She said the ring represented an eternal covenant, which is what it means when someone of the opposite sex wears a ring on their finger in the demonic realm, since he did it without saying anything. She wondered what kind of covenant it was and was curious. Adele called out to her and said they would arrive in an hour, earlier than expected. She seemed a little annoyed that he hadn't said anything more than that, but she shrugged it off and said, I'm going. Adele wondered if he had done something wrong or not. She told him to shut up because she wanted to take a nap. They finally arrived, and Adele was looking at the city where the streets were crowded with people. He said that this is the capital of the demon world, and it doesn't look much different from the human world, kind of medieval. But there are differences, like the people here have horns and other physical differences. The elite demons have visible tattoos, and one of them has a tattoo on his neck, just like Adele. Renee asked him why he was walking so leisurely and asked him to hurry up. He said, yes, and then asked, where are they going now? She told him that the entrance exam is at noon in 2 days, but they have to register first. He said that if they still had 2 days left, they should be in the capital by then, but she said she wasn't in the mood. He wondered why everything here was so awkward, and said it could be because she was homesick. He was about to ask her, but she interrupted him and said that there was no time for nonsense, and they had to go register. He told himself that he thought her story was that she had been out of the house since her mother died, and that he couldn't understand her. As they were walking, he said that Sect is amazingly shaped and must be 3 times bigger than any normal university. One egg-shaped person told Lahad that he was registered and had to return in 2 days, and then called the next one. Adele said they were here to enroll. The egg-headed man looked confused and asked Adele if he was a demon because he didn't look like one. He asked him angrily if he was half demon and was seriously applying, and went on to say that they might have lost the war, but he wondered what kind of place he thought he was dealing with. Adele replied that he envisioned a bleak future if someone as ugly as him treated him that way. The egg-headed man continued his insults, so Renee asked him what was going on. He looked at her, saw her horn, and said, unbelievable. I didn't expect to see someone from the 7 deadly sins house. He went on to say that if she was applying, she should say her home and her identity. She replied, I'm from Paris, and my name is Renee. This is my guardian who will be joining me. The egg-headed man said that if they allow a half-demon to be a bodyguard, the criteria for the 7 houses of sin have been met, and that he couldn't believe that Sect would accept one of them. Renee interrupted him and said, enough is enough. I won't stand by and watch you humiliate the House of Paris any longer. The egghead replied that he doesn't discriminate against the identity of applicants and told her to forget what he said, and asked about Adele's house and identity. Adele lied and said, my name is Adele. But the man with the head of eggs said that the registration was over and they could come back in 2 days. Adele explained that in the war between humans and demons, the half-demons were stronger and fought with the humans, so naturally the others hated them. He was upset, but there was nothing he could do about it. He told Renee that they should find a place to sit, but she was still upset. We saw them standing in front of a building, and he said, this looks good enough. She replied, the buildings here are so old. He told her that there was nothing they could do because they had no money, and the 10 coins Creed gave them was enough to live on for a month. After the war, the Paris house was so poor they couldn't ask for more. He asked her to let them in. As soon as they entered, the official welcomed them. Adele. He asked if there was enough room for 2 people for 2 days. The official replied in the affirmative, but asked if they would be staying in the same room, which made Renee freeze in place in embarrassment as if her brain was steaming. Adele said he wanted 2 separate rooms. The man replied that the price would be 2 pieces of gold for 2 sinks for 2 days, and that the sinks would be on the 2nd floor. Adele said it's about 200 KRW, so it's not too much. Renee said she was going first, looking a little disappointed. He told her he would get the bags afterward and told her to relax. She was still a little hesitant, but told him to relax as well. He told himself that she had lived in a big mansion all her life, so this was probably her first time sleeping in a place like this, but she would soon get used to it. He said he needed to rest for the next 2 days. The scene shifts to the academy, and one of the soldiers is barking and telling all the applicants to enter and follow instructions. Adele said that there were too many people. He wondered if there were at least 100 people, and couldn't believe that there were so many applicants who wanted to defeat humans. He realized he had to be careful about his identity. One person said that from this point on, everyone should hold on to their ID cards and go in order. Adele wondered what they meant by "get out," and suddenly, the train arrived at the station. Adele said he never expected this. One of the officials said that there was a labyrinth-like dimensional gate installed to prevent intruders, and no one could reach the site except by this train. Adele thought the huge fortress they saw was just a part of the place, not the academy itself. He wondered how big the place was. As they sat there, a voice announced that they would be arriving at the site soon, and they should prepare for impact. Adele looked surprised, and when he finally opened his eyes, he saw the academy. The train stops and starts to descend, telling them to go to the big hall for the exam. As they were walking, Adele and Renee saw many people getting off the train. Adele said, "This place is so big that it's a bit overwhelming. Most of the people here are young demons," but he wondered if there were other heirs of the 7 deadly sins. He spotted several people wearing distinctive uniforms and said they weren't students, they looked like teachers. He thought that if he could make a good impression on them, life here would be easier. Renee said it was getting late, and as the doors closed, the lights went out. "It's been daylight for a while," he said, wondering if it was a magical effect or not, and not knowing what they were going to be tested on. Then we heard a woman's voice telling everyone to shut up. When the light shone on her, everyone raised their eyes to her and she gave them a sharp look. She welcomed them all to sight, calling them idiots with no brains, and said she couldn't believe there were so many people eager to die this year. Adele can't believe the amount of stress in her voice alone. Then she started laughing and said that that was enough small talk, and they would start the audition immediately. When she started releasing her aura, Adele was worried about Renee, but she told him he needed to concentrate on the exam. The people around them began to choke and fall to their knees, and the teachers were watching the students. One of the teachers told a colleague that the headmistress had strange tastes and asked him what he thought. He replied to him, "It doesn't matter how talented you are. If your mental strength is weak, you have nothing." There is a reason why the director personally supervises the first stage of the admission test, called the mental endurance test, just to see if the applicants can withstand interrogation and keep secrets if they are caught. Afterward, the man said that 5 minutes had passed and most of them had signed, and that this should be enough by now. Except for 2 people, the rest all signed. She had high expectations because of the large number of applicants. The man said that about 40% lasted more than 5 minutes compared to the last round, which is a large number. She said that was a relief, and added that this batch had all the heirs of the 7 deadly sins, and that the rumors could be true because so many applicants had survived. He said it made sense, but asked her to wait, and was surprised. "Who is this boy? He doesn't look like one of the heirs." She said, "That's true, but he's been sober all along like the others, but at this rate, he won't last long. You can see him on his knees." The man realized that something wasn't normal. Adele began to emit an evil red aura that surprised the teachers and attracted the attention of Principal Lucien. They realized the situation was serious, and Adele began to release his energy into the crowd. One of the teachers grabbed his sword and said they had to finish him off right here, right now. At first he didn't look anything special, but suddenly the atmosphere around him changed and he developed a cold, emotionless killing intent, as if he were plucking a flower or killing a bug. Not the primitive killing intent of monsters, but the killing intent of the worst killers. This caused all the teachers to shout at him, and his reaction was faster than they realized. Lucien's voice made him look surprised because he felt nervous, which is wrong. He shouldn't feel that way in front of a test taker. The next teacher smiled. People were still falling on the floor and Adele was standing up. Adele said he was about to lose his mind, and that he had to find a way to cope with the situation. This was just before what happened. He said that if he used his killing intent, it would be enough to counter the aura, and he had no other choice, so he started screaming as he fired the intent. Lucien said that they were holding up well, and that her aura would only get stronger. Adele started laughing and said he could take it. Their auras started bouncing off each other, but it was actually her aura that was dissipating around him. She was surprised, and Adele was sobbing and trying to catch his breath. Then he said that it really worked, and that he felt much better now. Rennie wondered what she was doing, and looked at her and saw that she was shaking, but still standing. He said she was holding up as well as could be expected. He added that the heirs of the 7 deadly sins were also holding up well. Then they were introduced to us. The heir of envy is Bolton. The heir of lust is Ran, the heir of gluttony is Samuel, the heir of sloth is Aaron, and the heir of greed is Jawahar. Adele says that some of the characters are written with true love, but they are all destined to die at the hands of the main cast. 6 of them, including Rennie, will be killed. He then notices something that catches his eye and says, long white hair, red eyes, crown of thorns. Without a doubt, she is the worst villain in the future of the demon world. She is the demon lady and heir to the wrath, Diana. Suddenly, the aura stops, and the first test is over. Adele explains that the Demon King usually comes from the Wrath family, and there's no logical reason for her to be here. The Demon King's successor doesn't need to come to sight as an applicant to take the test, and he wonders if something happened that he doesn't know about. What kind of test is this? They must know who our parents are. One of them shouts. One of them screams and demands to see the principal, but he grabs him by the head like a basketball and says, it doesn't matter who your father is, okay. Then he throws him to the ground and says, I'm not going to repeat myself again. Anyone who can't last 5 minutes in the first test has no business here. He then announces that those who failed have been disqualified, and the guards are ordered to close the gates. Adele says that sight is really tough, but luckily, he passed the test. When he thinks about it, the girl is actually the headmistress of the academy, and he thinks he's seen her before. She's one of the most powerful characters in the demon world despite her cute looks. Next, she introduces herself as Lucien. Adele says that he was lucky to pass the first test, but he needs to be more careful because he could fall at any moment, especially since there will be fewer people passing the next test. He hears people talking about Renee and notices that she looks very famous, and says that it makes sense since they are all heirs of the 7 sins and can tolerate murderous intent, but no one has noticed him, even though he can tolerate it as well as them. Still, Rinya congratulates him and says he did a good job. He replies that he was just lucky, but he thinks he should at least be satisfied that he gave the impression that he's not just an ordinary applicant, and he's sure the teachers and the principal will recognize him. Then a teacher bellows to get everyone's attention, and the trainer, whose name is Ares, comes forward with a tattoo on his neck. Adele comments that he looks like the kind of guy who always has a switchblade in his pocket. Ares congratulates them on their success in the first test, and says that they have demonstrated great mental strength because the test was a simulation of a situation in which they would be tortured by humans in the future. He adds that the 8 applicants who survived the first test will receive extra points, and if they do well in the second test, they will be allowed to enter the weapons department. Adele says this is very lucky, and he feels grateful that he was able to endure and feel jealous of everyone else. Eris announces that he will now explain the next test, in which they will demonstrate their abilities, especially the skills and weapons they can use against humans. The class they are assigned to may depend on the results of this test, so they need to be careful about that. Adele says he must mean that they will be assigned to the right class at depending on the weapons and skills they use, and asks himself what kind of humans they will face. Ares says he's going to show them who their opponent will be in the next test. Then, he raises his fingers and snaps them, and a blue aura begins to form in his hands. A man dressed as a tiger with a gun starts to appear amidst the violent aura, and we see a man dressed as a tiger with a gun. Adele immediately recognizes him, and says, this is the most powerful hero among the heads of the 6 great families, and his name is Nina Seal. Ciel begins to emit a blue aura, and Adele wonders what brings this man here. It's so unexpected. Renee asks him if he knows who this is, and of course he does. This is the head of the house of Nina and someone closely related to the hero of the original story. Not only that, he's a known relative from birth. He's the father of the protagonist, the sword saint who made the most powerful house with his talent alone. The others recognize him and say he's the patron saint of the sword, and they seem to be trying to cut them off from the beginning. Adele says that it makes sense, they're really trying to do that, especially since he's already defeated so many demon houses before. Ares tells them that of course, he doesn't expect them to withstand the full power of the Sword Saint, and that's why he's only going to use 10% of his power, because if he uses his full power, they won't have a chance to survive. Renee says that 10% is easy, but Adele says that's not true. Even if he's weak, a monster is still a monster, and 10% of his power can easily destroy an entire city. He asks himself, how can they make an exam so tough? There must be a certain standard for passing. He wishes he could use a scroll. He wishes he could use a scroll of information, but he doesn't have enough money and the number of questions he can ask is limited. Eris says that at their current levels, they can't face it alone, so they will divide into teams to ensure fairness. The top 8 will be assigned to separate places, and the rest will be randomly assigned. Adele says he can't count on anyone to pick him up this time, but the students start to stare at Renee and want her to do it, and other people stare at Adele. and he says he's used to it, and they think he's just a lucky one. Renee then taps him on the shoulder and tells him to succeed and bring back Salem, and he responds by wishing her luck as well. Aris starts calling out the groups, and we learn that Adele is in group 33, and his team members are Kenna, Chris, and Sans. Adele says he doesn't know who they are, and that they could be minor characters who don't have much of a role in the original story. We see them standing in front of Adele, and he recognizes them himself. Chris recognizes himself and cries, and Sanchez looks angry and asks why half a demon is the team leader and says it's an insult to his family. Adele says he can't believe it. Even the minor characters are starting to look down on him, and there's no way this person thinks his home is that important. He then tells them all to do their best, and Chris and Kenna agree with him. He says they should assign roles, and he wants to know what weapons and abilities they use, starting with Chris. Chris says his ability is mana transformation, and he can summon a triangular prism and turn it into a shield or sword. He doesn't have a lot of killing power, but he's very versatile. Adele says that he's not a monster at all and that he'll pass the test. He then tells Kenna that it's her turn now. Kenna says she's more of a support type than a combat type. Adele asks her if she means support abilities, and she replies, giving an example of her praying to the Demon Lord to increase her allies' speed. When she starts to say the spell, Adele starts to feel the boost. She asks him what's up, and if it feels lighter, even though the effect was almost noticeable. He says, I think so. She calls him cruel and is disappointed, and he laughs and says he was just joking and tells her not to get upset. He then says that her ability is better than nothing, but that she is weak and doesn't know how she passed the first test. He then asks Sanchez about his own abilities, and Sanchez replies that he's the best he can do. He starts forming rocks around his body, and Adele comments that this stiffening ability is perfect for his role as a blocker. Sanchez then asks Adele to show him his abilities. Adele uses the switch skill and switches places to be right in front of Sanchez's face, surprising him. Adele explains that this is a teleportation ability. Sanchez starts to sweat, realizing that he could have been killed at that moment. Kenna and Chris say that the ability looks amazing, and Adele thanks them for the compliment. He adds that he doesn't know what variables might arise, so he doesn't want to reveal his true abilities just yet. He then explains that the distribution of places should be simple. Chris and Sanchez, who are good at defense, will be up front. He will be in the center, and Kenna will support them from behind. He asks them if it's okay, and Kenna says, and Sanchez nods in agreement from behind. Harris announces that it's time for the next test, and each group needs to prepare. Adele says it's finally starting. The first group advances, and even though they're facing the Sword Saint, their eyes are full of excitement. His sword moves like it's in slow motion, but all of a sudden it can take out all 4 members in an instant, surprising everyone. Some of them start screaming, and Adele says that he can't even see his movement, asking himself if it's even 10% of his strength. Then Ares calls out to the second group, and they are crushed as well. Then the third, and Kenna and Chris look worried. After the fourth, a few members of the fourth group don't want to enter the fight, saying there's no point, and they don't want to lose points. Ares coldly tells them that they can skip the test, and asks if the other 2 members will continue. They say they will try, which surprises Adele that they are determined to try. He says that what he's thinking could be right, but as usual, he doesn't explain what island. Chris asks if they really don't have to take the test, and Adele replies, of course not. The 2 virtuous members of the 4th group are now standing in front of CL. Adele says it's impossible to deal with him and 2 people, and he wants to observe for longer, but they are immediately eliminated by remote Halo attacks. Adele comments that if this was a real Halo sword, would be split in half. Chris asks if they can actually defeat such a monster. Sanchez replies that there's no reason to be afraid of a mere human, even though he's shaking with fear. Adele laughs at this. The 5th group is eliminated, and events accelerate from the 6th to the 9th group. The 10th group quits, and then they continue to the 30th group. Adele says that by the time they reach the 30th group, 5 groups have withdrawn, and none of them have managed to deal a single, effective blow to the Sword Saint. This is a battle against an unbeatable opponent, and there are no restrictions on withdrawal in the text. It's not all bad, though, as we see them fending off the attack, and Chris looks amazed. Adele says that the more they advance, the longer the battles get, and the better their skills get compared to the previous applicants. And he now understands what the real requirement is in order to prepare for the next test. Sanchez says it's their turn, and Chris Bird says he's scared. Adele tells them that he has figured out how to succeed. Sanchez asks him what he means. Adele says the criteria is that even if they lose to an overwhelming force, they have to get up and fight until the end. Based on the way the trainers deal with quitters and the strength of the Sword Saint, He is sure of this. Sanchez is about to say something, but Adele interrupts him, and Ares interrupts them as he calls out, Group 33. Adele says that they have to defeat the Sword Saint because with their strength, they can do this. Sanchez asks him if he's serious, but Chris and Kenna react to the idea and say it doesn't matter if they lose. Adele says it doesn't matter if he's half demon or not. With his talent, he can defeat the most powerful villain. The team is lined up in battle formation, and Adele says it's time to start. Unlike the main character, Adele doesn't know much about CL because he didn't specify many things while creating him, and he asks himself what to do now. He tells them not to get nervous and to fight from where they are. Chris says okay, but Sanchez replies that he's known this all along. The Sword Saint's aura begins to move around his body, and Adele shouts, "No, he's coming." CL swings his sword upward, breaking Chris's entire barrier and throwing him into the air. Sanchez manages to hold on, and Adele orders Kenna to protect Chris, to which she replies that she's doing it because she needs to minimize the impact of his fall. Adele then tells Sanchez that it's his turn, and Sanchez screams, "I know." The next blow comes, and Sanchez takes it all the way with his body, but manages to block it. After he withstands the attack, Adele says that this is good, and that he noticed a gap before the second strike. But it's so obvious that his instincts tell him it's a trap, and he wonders if Seal has artificial intelligence or something like that. Adele tells them that the second strike is coming right now and they need to get back to their places. Chris gets back up, and we see that his barrier is cracked, which means he's about to collapse, and Sanchez's arm is also cracking, all in one fell swoop. Adele tells Sanchez to hold on a little longer. As Seal launches his next attack, Adele says, "It's the same pattern." Chris throws Laura again, and Sanchez tries to block the blow with his armor, but his deflection disappears as the attack gets stronger. Sanchez asks him what he's going to do, and he says they're all going to die if it goes on like this. Adele replies that they just have to hold on a little longer. Sanchez calls him crazy, but Adele says they were the only team to block the second strike, and wonders if Seal will use the same pattern again. Seal raises his sword towards them, then points it along the ground and strikes with both hands in a terrifying double-handed strike. The air around them begins to change, and Adele realizes something. Chris is on the ground and Kenna is treating him. Adele walks over to him and asks him if he's okay. He says he knows it's hard, but he needs to trust him again. Chris is in pain and asks Sanchez what Adele is doing. While Seal is about to attack again, Chris asks if Adele has a plan, to which Adele replies, "Sure, I'll shove my sword down his throat for sure," and then smiles a truly evil smile. Kenna and Chris look at him worriedly. Just then, Salon begins to prepare for his next attack, and the aura around him grows. Sanchez yells out a warning that the attack is coming and tells Chris to move back. Adele says he'll have to hold out this time without a barrier. Sanchez asks him what he means. Just as the third attacker swoops in, before Sanchez can catch up, he suddenly loses his transformation and flies into the sky. Adele ties himself to him with his ability to switch places, so they switch places, and he is now just above Ciel. Adele then ties himself to his sword and switches places again, causing the sword in the sky to return to Laura. Adele returns with his dagger, and now that Ciel is unarmed, he says this is his chance to kill him. As the attack is about to take place, Iris and Rennie are stunned, but Ciel actually kicked Adele in the chest a few moments ago, but wouldn't have stabbed him in the throat. Adele starts spitting blood and says he has to hold on. Then he activates his feature, and the darkness begins to wrap around them, creating a small cocoon. He says that if it wasn't for Chris's barrier, his guts would have exploded. The repositioning failed, but at least he was able to trap Ciel in a space of pure darkness with no trace of light. Even he, Doob, could see it. But he has the Dark Fang, and in that space, it's more powerful than any weapon and will defeat him with everything it has. Ciel shakes his head a bit, then starts walking towards Adele and makes his way through the darkness, and Adele is so impressed that he says, "This guy is a real monster." We see Adele throwing his hands up in the air and smiling, because that was part of his plan. The Dark Fang starts spinning in the air behind Ciel, but it's not the only attack, there are many others. Adele says, "This time you fell into my trap." Addressing the Sword Saint, he says, "The time of the end has come." Many fangs of darkness begin to emerge from small cracks, and Adele clenches his fists and activates the rain of black blades, which stabs the Sword Saint from all sides. The cocoon begins to slowly disappear. Chris and the others ask what's going on, and Ares says it's almost over. As the darkness disappears, Adele steps forward from the darkness to reveal Ciel's body lying on the ground. Everyone is stunned, and the room falls silent. Adele smiles and says, "Silence means I've done something good." Bolton comments that it was fun. Chris and Kenna then run up to Adele and say that what he did was amazing, and ask him how he did it. Adele replies, "It was a collaboration between everyone," and asks about Sanchez. Kenna says he was traumatized, but the teachers are helping him recover. Adele says, "That's reassuring." He then adds, "It's time for us to finish this." They ask him what he means, and he says, "It's all over." By the time Adele stabs Seal's body, his legs start to shake. Chris asks, "What are you doing?" He says, "We need to make sure he's really dead." Aries watches with interest. Then Ran laughs and says, "For Hajin, it's him." And one of her fans comments, "For you, it's nothing special." Ran laughs and replies, "Of course, he was born with less, and his true nature will come out, no matter how hard he tries." She then notices Renee giving her an angry look. Ran asks herself, what's wrong with her? She notices her horns and associates them with the Paris family, but still doesn't understand the reason for the look, and says it's starting to frankly scare her. Some people misunderstand and say that this is to be expected from the heirs of the Seven Sins, and that they are indeed in a battle of psychological intimidation. Her first fan interjects and says, "It's clear that the victory will go to Ran. The other girl isn't even fit to be a snack." At this moment, Adele sees Renee from afar and wonders why she's radiating so much violence and aggression. Iris approaches Adele, and when Adele turns to him and asks him what he wants, Iris asks him if he is saying all this because he doesn't really know the truth. Adele says he has no idea. Iris turns to him and says that he will be watching him from now on. Adele comments that he thought he was getting a compliment or something like that, but instead, he experienced the most embarrassing moment of his life, adding that Aries could simply be autistic. As Ran and Renee face each other, Adele comments that he can't believe they're still going through with this, and he's now on Renee's side. He asks about the girl standing next to her, and starts to say that based on her hair and the horns on her exposed forehead, she's from the House of Lust, and her name is Laurel Ran, but he wonders why she's trying to fight with Renee here. He's been so preoccupied with the story of the human world that he's completely oblivious to the events of the demon world. Laurel notices him in the crowd and starts to look at him, then screams and calls him a hybrid. Adele is surprised and asks why she is calling him that. She says he should be her slave. Renee suddenly rushes over and pulls out her sword and is about to attack Laurel. Adele calls her by her name. Laurel looks stunned and begins to draw her weapon, wondering if she's gone crazy. Aries yells and orders everyone to stand up, emphasizing that unnecessary fights are not allowed in sight, and that they should take their personal issues out of here. Adele is relieved that Aries resolved the situation, and says it's good that nothing ugly happened between them before the entrance ceremony. Renee walks away annoyed, but Laurel comments that she might not be in her right mind. Adele asks her if she's okay and reminds her that it's her group's turn, so she needs to prepare herself. Renee walks over to him and starts wiping the sweat off his forehead and says he did a good job. Laurel begins to question the nature of their relationship and wonders if Renee is really dating a half-demon. Adele replies that he's doing better now that he passed the test and thanks her. Renee says that she thinks he hid his power to pretend to be weak, and asks him if she's wrong. But before he can continue his evasive talk, the 34th group is called, and she says she has to walk, but she's not going to tell anyone. Adele says he used all his strength to get infected and asks if he looks so weak. It turns out she's still a Valkyrie priest of the family. Laurel screams again and asks Adele to say his name. He asks her if she speaks to him, and she says yes. He tells her his name, she says it's not a bad name, and he asks her what she wants from him. She starts releasing her aura and says they've crossed paths before, asks him to leave the Parisian and serve her instead, and says he'll testify to how crazy hot she is, and that she's going to steal and crush his stupid skirts. Adele says he's fine, but he needs to watch Renee and then they can talk. She starts to get confused and asks herself why it's not working. He's completely preoccupied, asking himself if he can see the full power of Renee, completely ignoring Laurel. He wonders if she's strong enough to have high expectations for the other 7 sons of sin. As she and Ciel stand in direct confrontation and release their auras, Adele comments that she is much stronger than he imagined. Renee begins to advance on her own, drawing Diana's attention. Bolton says she's fun too. Adele can't believe she's walking along the side of the Sword Saint, and wonders what she's thinking, standing right in front of him. They start to look at each other, their aura is still rising, then it starts to fade for a moment, and Renee starts to clench her teeth. The atmosphere is very charged between them, and before the Sword Saint can even get a chance to attack, Renee cuts his body in half with just one blow. Adele looks stunned as she backs away, leaving half of him standing. The crowd is screaming like crazy, and Aries says, it's not worth it. Adele says, no. Rand says it's unfortunate that she didn't get to see herself being humiliated by the Sword Saint, but Renee, should be able to at least have that level of strength if she's going to face her. Adele asks, does that mean that all the children of the 7 deadly sins can defeat the true Sword Saint? Rand replied, no one can do that right now, and if the last Demon King was still alive, it might have been different. But Adele said, if the boys are only 10% stronger than the Sword Saint, then when they grow up, they will be much stronger than him. Rana asked him if he was throwing stones at her and said that anyone with eyes could see that this is not even a tenth of the real power of the Sword Saint. Adele replied that if this is true, it means that he had a hard time against a counterfeit that is not even a tenth of the real one. and said that he could be the author of this world, but he doesn't know anything about the world of demons. But the anticipation makes his heart beat fast, and he can't wait to see what will happen. Only the children of the 7 deadly sins remained. And due to the effect of Rene's test, the rest of the children defeated the Sword Saint very easily. The battles were so one-sided that it was hard to distinguish the power levels between the heirs, but he knew who was the strongest of them all, so there was no need to worry. Ares roared and said that the entrance exams were over and asked everyone to gather in front of the stage for the announcement of the results of the next exam. He said that everyone who participated in the fight passed, whether they won or lost. Adele commented, "Exactly what I expected." Ares told everyone who passed the test that they did a great job and are now officially members of Sect and official trainees, but they shouldn't be too happy, because the road ahead will be so hellish and difficult that they will wish they could give up. Ares went on to say that everyone who passed must attend the acceptance ceremony in 2 days, but asked the 8, who defeated the Sword Saint, to stay put. Rene asked why, and Adele said they could be rewarded with access to the weapons room that she remembered from the first test. Ares said that they all passed the test with flying colors, and as promised, he would give them a chance to enter the weapons room. Bolton raised his hand and said he had a question, and Ares said go ahead. Bolton asked if they could come out with a lot of weapons because they must be very useful. Adele commented, as expected of Lycan Bolton, son of envy, his curiosity knows no bounds. He made a brief appearance in my novel. Ares replied, no, it's hard to concentrate if someone is carrying so many weapons. That's why only one weapon is allowed, and we're too busy to answer any more questions. He then asked them to follow him to the weapons room. Ares walked up to a wall and started pumping mana into it and said, this is the advantage that Kate offers you, whether you choose the best or the worst, it's up to you.